everyone, this is Ronnie at Everything Vive, and I'm here with Jani Joki. He's the Director of Engineering at UL Benchmarks, and he's actually been a long-time employee of Futuremark as well, so I wanted to kind of take the time to talk to him today about what, his career, at Futuremark and then UL Benchmarks, as well as the work that they've been doing in VRMark, specifically relating to our podcast. So thank you so much for joining me, Jani, and hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So yeah, like we had a few minutes to chat before starting the interview, and like I was kind of explaining before we started, I've definitely been a longtime fan of Futuremark and the work that they did on that they've done on their benchmarks for the PC. Longtime user of 3DMark specifically. I was looking back to try to remember when I had first started using 3DMark, and it looks like I don't think I used 99, but I used 3DMark 2000. So I started my first experience with 3D graphics on the PC. I want to say that I purchased like a 3DFX Voodoo 2 back in the day, and that was kind of my first foray into getting into this hobby. So and 3DMark was a very important tool that I back then I want to say it was probably more just to see all the amazing graphics and effects that I was able to run on my PC. And then later, as I got more into this hobby, I used 3DMark more and more for benchmarking purposes, for overclocking and that sort of thing. But yeah, I've been a huge fan of Futuremark's work and have used 3DMark for a long time. So I was kind of excited to get a chance to talk to you guys about VRMark and the stuff that you're doing, for virtual reality as well.
Awesome. Yeah. 3DMark 2000 was maybe the first real benchmark. 3DMark 99 and 3DMark 99 Max, which were the first ones to launch on the 3DMark brand, were they were pretty good products, but 2000 was the first one we threw lots of effort into, and that was also it spread wide and far.
Yeah.
Also, curiously, the designs of the benchmarks have kind of followed the same path that you just mentioned. So originally, we spent a lot of time just making them look really cool, and they were really showpieces. That one of the reasons why people downloaded them was not necessarily to even do the measurement part, just to show off what cool things you could do.
Yeah.
And as time has moved forward, we're moving more and more into the professional measurement thing, which is what the last few 3D benchmarks have been all about. They still, of course, we want to make them look cool, but we spend maybe 95% of the effort to make sure that it really measures accurately and just make it look cool afterwards.
Okay, and since you're the director of engineering, you'd be a good person to ask. What are some of the things, moving from making it look cool to making the numbers kind of mean something as far as benchmarking the systems and all of that? What kind of goes into making those numbers mean something, and what are you guys usually trying to measure when developing your benchmarks?
So the primary design for every Futuremark benchmark or UL benchmark is to make sure that it evaluates your device in some known usage factor, like playing a specific type of game, or even using Office PC, because we have products for that purpose as well. Mm-hmm. And the measurement is something that real world and relevant to the end user. Okay. So we don't create something like a theoretical simulation or some outrageous small case scenario where you draw some kind of a weird conclusion. What we want to do is if you correlate our benchmark results with real world similar applications, you can do a very good correlation between the two and see. So for example, for 3DMark in particular, we do quite a bit of evaluation on actual games, and then see if the frame rates and the scores we get out of 3DMark, how well do they match the frame rates and that you get from actual games when running on different hardware. And if you take 10 of the popular games, take 10 to 20 different hardware configurations and draw a map in between, your 3DMark score excessively well predicts exactly how your gaming performance would do. So that's the underlying idea, and that's also what goes into the design. So a lot of the time we have to spend is to make sure that what we do in the 3DMark is using the same techniques that games use or will use, that we use them in the same ratio and the same fashion. Of course, because 3DMark is always designed for the future. So the 3DMark that we create today is really intended to be lasting for at least the next 5 years. We also have to evaluate like how games will behave in the future.
Okay, very
For
cool.
this,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so for this we talk to a lot of game developers to see what their future roadmaps look like, and of course we talk to a lot to the hardware vendors themselves. What new features are coming in the new hardware? How they envision they're going to be used, and then we design the benchmark around those factors. The graphics that we do, of course, we create them in a similar fashion that game developers would do. Basically, the only thing that is different between us and them is that we produce content for maybe 2-3 minutes, whereas, of course, they have to do it for hours on end. But the same methodologies, tools, everything is pretty much in place.
Okay. And as far as, as far as the rating system that you guys have developed, the scoring, and I know kind of like how you had mentioned before, the benchmarking applications themselves have kind of shifted and focused more towards, providing the feedback as far as numbers and scoring. And I know as, the internets became more and more vital to the PC experience, part of the fun of running 3DMark and other UL benchmarks is being able to compare your scores to other people out there with different types of configurations to kind of see how your system's stacking up. Like, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about how you've seen your software and your benchmarks kind of progress over the years into some of that. Because I know, I would imagine that some of these, like, hardcore overclockers and all that kind of stuff didn't really exist in your early days, but it seems like they're a pretty big part of your business now. So I didn't know if you wanted to talk about that a little bit.
The idea of overclocking has existed for a very long time, but it used to be a thing that almost everybody did. It's just like when everybody was a young student who did this stuff, it was a way to save money.
Yeah.
You buy a CPU, overclock it, or a GPU and overclock it to basically like get a slightly better system for cheaper. But I think that has mostly gone away in the last 5 years. But it has been kind of replaced with these people who do overclocking as a profession, or at least like an extremely serious hobby. We're pursuing the performance of the PC is really just for the pursuit of performance by itself. They're not really designed to build a system that you will then use to play games. It's just to run it as fast as you can. I often describe it as just like hot rodding your car for drag racing.
Yeah,
it's for its own purpose, and people love it. Especially in Asia, we see there's a large amount of things. Computex always has these cool overclocking shows. They have stage lights and smoke and everything in it.
Yeah, no,
we love it. It is a smallest portion of our user base is quite large. So the overclockers are small, but they're extremely visible.
Yeah,
and of course they push the very edge, and we're all about the edge as well. So they're an important part of us.
Yeah, no, for me it's always fun. Like I said, I've been using 3DMark for close to 2 decades now, I guess. And I've never really, I've always, kind of been on the periphery, just overclocking for more my own benefit, like you were saying, just to play games a little bit better on my hardware. But it's always really fascinating to kind of see the crazy lengths that people go to get as high scores as possible, and watching, people use, liquid nitrogen and all that kind of stuff to really get just some outrageous, types of numbers out of their systems, and then kind of showing what they're able to do, double the performance sometimes of a card that, otherwise you wouldn't be able to get those kind of numbers with. So it's cool as a fan of the products that you guys release to see some of the things that those kind of users are able to pull out of them. So it's good to know that
even though like a lot of the hardware companies, they do employ overclockers just for the marketing effect of it, because it's, like we said, it's cool. But also a lot of the stuff they do actually goes into research into new cooling technologies and cooling solutions for the future. So they do draw innovation out of it as well. It's some of the, not the most outrageous solutions, of course, but there's a lot of things that they do that eventually makes its way into consumer products as well, in one way or another.
Very, very cool. So yeah, I guess moving on to VRMark more specifically. So as someone that, you know, comes from just the more generic PC gaming background, that, you know, went from just playing normal games on normal monitors to eventually really getting into VR and starting this VR podcast, I was really excited to see when you guys, you know, announced and then eventually released VRMark, which is, you know, as some of our listeners may or may not know, it's a benchmark that UL Benchmarks put out, specifically geared towards virtual reality and what the performance for VR applications it will be like. If you want to talk a little bit about what went into the development of VRMark specifically, and kind of what you guys set out to do differently with VRMark, you know, as opposed to just you know, running 3DMark to test systems, you know, for those who are interested in VR.
Yeah, so we started VR development actually quite early in the cycle. I think we spent like almost 2 years on VRMark development because it's actually quite common in our industry or our business specifically, to be working on something that is so far in the future that while we're developing, it keeps changing underneath us. Mm-hmm. And this also happened for VR a lot, which makes the development cycle very interesting.
I can imagine.
But the primary reasons why we strove toward like a specific VR benchmark is that even though it's 3D rendering, there are aspects in VR that don't make it themselves visible in like 2D rendering. One is, of course, that you have to render the scene twice or produce 2 images for both eyes. The other one is you require an extremely high frame rate. So you need to know, like, effectively you can see that you have to do twice the work at least 50% more speed. So to hit the 90 frame per second limit, and the resolution also needs to be higher. Like a lot of people still game in 1080p, but 1080p is nowhere sufficient for VR. So the performance requirements are actually quite high, or excessively high. Also, the visual quality, because of the various things, you also need to do pretty strong AA to make sure that, so MSAA usually. And all of this accounts to the fact that to produce an image that people will enjoy in VR requires a significantly more performance than like what you would imagine the same image would appear on like a traditional monitor. The aspects of like for producing the stereo image where you render both eyes, there's all kinds of trickery and magic you can do to reduce the amount of work so you don't have to do everything twice. But it also takes away some effects that you're very traditional in games. There are traditional 2D games use a lot of post-processing effects that work with screen space. So they do some kind of a non-real effect on the screen that looks pretty good when you look at it. But these are all unusable in VR because they are not consistent across the eyes. And since you see one image per eye, you would just not enjoy it. And the extra high frame rate also requires that the amount of latency that you have to spend is so you have to produce frames at a really fast rate, which means that the amount of stuff you can do in them is limited. Also limits the amount of like gains you can get from things like Crossfire and SLI, because eventually you'll have to, even if you have like, let's say 4 cards, you still have to, the Vive, for example, is only connected to one of them, which means that all the other 3 need to move the image that they produced to that one. And the transfer of the image alone can take like 3-4 milliseconds, which doesn't sound like much, but the at 90 frames per second, you only have 12 milliseconds per frame to do. So the scaling for SLI effects is a lot more limited.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also, of course, the design of the scene is completely different in traditional 2D rendering. Or 2D displays, you imagine usually that you're looking through a lens. So you have lens-like effects like lens flares and whatnot. But in VR, there's supposed to be eyes. So all such effects also go away, and that also changes the landscape quite a bit.
Very interesting. Yeah, I initially when I started, VR, like when I was kind of prepping my system for the release of the Oculus Rift and the Vive, I think I had started out with 980 Ti's at the time, and then kind of shifted over to I eventually shifted over just to using a single 1080 Ti just because I'm not sure how many applications have actually utilized it, but I was interested in kind of the some of what NVIDIA was kind of touting with the 10 series as far as like different like projections and being able to kind of increase performance by not having to render the scene. You probably know the details on some of that stuff a lot better than I do, but as far as limiting the taxing of the GPU for rendering twice, I think the projections kind of work differently or something. It's been kind of fascinating to see what the companies have been doing to kind of increase VR performance, and I'm sure some ideas that the different hardware vendors have about what may or may not be useful sometimes pan out, sometimes they don't, sometimes developers don't necessarily take advantage of them. And I know to some extent that probably applies to all 3D graphics, especially when you guys are trying to make projections several years in the future as to how game developers are actually going to use hardware. But you had kind of mentioned that VR specifically, since it is so new and it is so different, and you talked a lot about kind of some of those differences that traditional game development has gotten accustomed to using that are no longer applicable. So far, what are some of the things that maybe you guys thought initially were going to be big pushes or big draws in VR that maybe didn't pan out, or things that have kind of have things gone generally in the direction that you guys were thinking, just as far as what the loads were going to be like, or with DirectX 12 and all these different, have things been kind of different in VR than you guys were maybe anticipating, or?
I think a lot of things panned out roughly the way we expected. Maybe the most surprising thing that we did not fully expect is that the extremely high quality of the reprojection or time warp or space warp techniques that Vive and Oculus used. So originally we're pretty expecting that you would have to solve most of the problems in VR by just throwing like more raw performance at it. Like I said, kind of expecting that like a really good like a VR experience, maybe like a 8K per eye resolution and like 120 frames per second, and it's an excessively high target to hit. But very quickly we realized that both Oculus and Vive are able to do pretty much magic with the space warps. And we conducted like internal studies with just our own staff on seeing that which one is preferable. Like a high resolution, high quality image that is actually pretty low frame rate, but let just space warp like fudge it for you, or actually a high frequency display with lower image quality. And a lot of people still prefer the better image quality, even though the frame rate was pretty low.
Interesting.
And this just talks to the quality of these techniques. I mean, it doesn't solve all cases, but it solves so many of them that it actually has brought the accessibility of VR a lot closer than we originally thought.
Yeah.
And also gives us like great hope for the future, because the current generation is I mean, it's a wonderful piece of technology, but I would lie if I say I wasn't expecting like an even further evolution with even higher frame rates and even higher resolutions.
Yeah.
If I look into the future a little bit, all vendors are basically doing similar techniques in foveation. So foveation, in a nutshell, is the idea that the human eye only looks at a certain part of the screen with high degree of resolution, and everything else is slightly fuzzy. And there is actually no reason for the graphics card to render anything with high resolution other than that part that you're looking at. So both all vendors currently have some kind of a solution for this already. They're pretty much with the idea that you're looking into the middle of the screen, which is in VR cases is pretty common. But future technologies, of course, will have some kind of an eye tracking solution, or most likely will have an eye tracking solution, which will then allow you to do this even smarter. So regardless of where you look, it always looks like you're looking at this wonderful, maybe 4 to 8K resolution, but everything in your peripheral is actually like super low quality, and you can't even, like, it's pretty fuzzy. But if done correctly, and I've seen some solutions that are very good at it already, basically you will never be able to tell. But for the graphics card, this can be an order of magnitude less work in many cases. So you can really push for the super high quality things without actually having to brute force it all. And I was expecting that this would happen, but I think it's happening faster than I really thought it would. And it's for like a technologist such as myself. So we've been working with the latest technology for years. So we love all kinds of new cool stuff. Yeah. And I think this is a wonderful solution for what is like an extremely hard problem. But it's just it's elegant. It's a smart way to do exactly the right amount of work to produce all the stuff that you need, and then you can avoid doing the stuff you don't really need.
No, that's really interesting. No, and I likewise I've been kind of following the work that's being done with foveated rendering and kind of making things more efficient. I think especially moving forward, if we're going to have more and more VR experiences where you're not necessarily required to be tethered to a full PC, it's super critical and important to be able to make the rendering as efficient and low cost as possible, so that you can play these experiences on a wide variety of different types of hardware. So because right now, I mean, you have to have the beefiest system possible, and like you were saying, even then we're running at less than ideal, I think, situations than what would be preferred if we can really look more towards the future of higher resolution displays. And it's interesting to hear that in your testing that people are that the reproduction technology is smooth enough to where you're being surprised by what people are willing to kind of sacrifice as far as performance goes in order to have the increased visuals. Because that's something that you always hear about people really being worried about performance and barriers relating to nausea and frame latency being so critical. And I know it's still obviously critical regardless of those sacrifices, but it'll be interesting, I guess, to see kind of what developers choose as their targets for what type of performance they want to hit on, especially some of these like more future looking applications of VR where maybe the resources won't be necessarily as brute force powerful as even what we're using right now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, of course, like it depends heavily on the content, on whether you can take like a lower frame rates or not. And of course, it's an individual preference, so I wouldn't say like everybody agreed.
Sure.
But I was definitely surprised because, of course, we're a company where people like deal with things like frame rate all the time.
Yeah.
So they're pretty easily can spot moments when frames are being dropped. Mm-hmm. But in many cases, the technologies they work amazingly well. They solve the problem that is at hand within the limitations they can in an extremely a good way. So
And
I think it's good for the industry because it's allowed to push the hardware requirements a bit lower. I think it's I mean, the enthusiastic community that we also serve, like they don't have a problem with, but they have the PCs already for it.
Yeah.
But for widespread adoption, of course, you want to push the barrier for entry as low as possible. And when both the devices launched, it was quite high. Again, it's not a problem for the PC gaming crowd or the people who love this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But to get it for mainstream, it really needs to come lower. Of course, every year that has passed, the $1,000 PCs is always more powerful. But ideally, you should be able to do it with, like I said, untethered devices. Mobile devices have VR, actually pretty good VR even. So it's all moving in the right direction.
Yeah, no, it's as somebody that's been building PCs and working with 3D graphics for a long time. Yeah, it was interesting to see all of a sudden an application like VR that seemed to just be like hitting the hardware in such a different and more intense way than I think a lot of the software has been recently. I mean, playing games at 4K is obviously super taxing, but it's such a different type of taxing than what these early versions of VR have been. So I don't know if you can speak to this a little bit, but something that you had mentioned kind of made me think about it. I don't know if on the software side of benchmarking and kind of engaging performance, do any of these new wireless solutions that are coming out? I know like the Vive, for example, has an official wireless adapter coming out soon through their partnership with DisplayLink, and then there have been previous versions of similar kind of technologies that are that are already at market, like TPCast and other, like, do any of those types of technologies where you're beaming or compressing the video from the PC over to the headset, did those affect? Did you guys try to look into some of the performance hits there as far as latency, or is that kind of outside of your purview?
So it is a bit outside our purview. So the primary design of ours is that we produce the frame within the GPU itself. Okay. So the time it takes to move it from the display interface to the display itself is not something that is actually possible to monitor from inside the PC. The PC does not know when it's actually ends up on screen.
Okay.
We have built for industry. We built a solution that uses like an external camera that actually looks at the display itself to evaluate the latency between the PC and the actual display. But and it could be most likely used for this purpose as well. But it's not particularly something that we're pursuing heavily on.
Got it.
So I am right now. I think all the beaming technologies and one of them basically just solve take the wire away and just solve it there. Theoretically, I've been predicting, let's see if I'm correct at some point, that these kind of like a wireless technologies will be slightly smarter because you could transmit the data from the PC to the headset in a format that is not a 2D image. You could provide some of the 3D elements, and then some of the rendering even could be done on the headset. And then it would reduce the amount of data that you need to transfer, which would push down the latencies, and then you could just do a bunch of the processing on the headset itself. And most likely the net effect would be a win, because I do not believe that the image transfer approach will work when we're talking like 16K frames, for example, which become too big. But I think it's a wonderful solution for the interim. I do know a lot of people that have been showing VR too over the years. Maybe usually the first thing that they say that the wire is really annoying. So
no, definitely
getting rid of the wire is like however you do it right now it's going to be a good thing.
Well, that's a really interesting prediction, just as far as like kind of the hybrid, because for me I think eventually standalone headsets will definitely hopefully have a big place on the market, bigger than even now with the Oculus Go and some of these newer more mobile experiences that you can have in VR. But the hybrid model actually sounds like a really interesting one where you're able to localize some of the processing in the head-mounted display, but while also taking advantage of the increased processing power that you have, with the PC as well. So that actually sounds like something that I'd be really interested in seeing happen. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, the problem with the approach is that it puts more burden on the developer, because of course then you need to produce it in a specific fashion to get it out, and it's also changed the paradigm of how you can approach rendering a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think the end would be a win. Well, we shall see.
Huh. No, and that's also in addition to all those things you're saying, I guess it would also, I wonder how that would impact, like obviously right now we have multiple hardware manufacturers making different types of headsets, and I can imagine that would increase the workload as far as, developing a title for one head-mounted display versus another if the technology doesn't line up exactly the same way.
Yeah. So there's on that front, like there is an initiative from Kronos called OpenXR that's designed to unify of course, this is not the approach that just described, but the traditional approach that's currently being used.
Yeah.
So you only read to write once and it will work on Oculus and Vive and pretty much all the other guys as well.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that whatever the future of VR also will bring, there's going to be some kind of a unified API. It always happens that in the beginning when technology is booming, like VR happened in this one, everybody comes up with their own solution, and that's pretty much required because you can't wait for a common solution, otherwise your development slows down. But for the wide adoption for developers, I mean, if developers have a hard time implementing for everything, it just means there's less content. And if there's less content, there's going to be less users. So getting like a common API, common frame way that you actually produce content is just a win for all. And I think everybody agrees to this. So I don't think that we'll see fragmentation. I think we'll more see like a people pulling together.
Okay, no, that's good to hear. So, because I totally agree, and I think you see that more and more now. I mean, even with some of the early exclusivity and Oculus and different types of platform, that still exists to some extent. Just the nature of the business, as far as what it takes to get funding to be able to create the projects that you're looking for, and right now, it is sometimes hard to be able to recoup investments on some of these bigger developed games, but at the same time, you see things like Revive and other, and just in general, I think most of the big VR titles, fortunately, even some of the console specific ports, like you're seeing them being ported or brought to all of the different platforms pretty regularly. So it's been great to see that, and also see the advantages of starting out on the PC. I think VR is super exciting in terms of what independent developers have been able to bring to the table, and some of the most interesting stuff that we see are from those smaller developers. So.
On that one I definitely agree. On one level, I've been hoping and I'm still hoping that we would have like a big VR title. Mm-hmm. I think VR needs it's like Wii Sports.
Yeah.
To really push it in, the one title that like is good enough that people will actually paying for the hardware to buy it. And unfortunately, I don't think we have that one right now.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I also do believe that we've seen a really super well devised game for VR specifically. They a lot of them are still like some kind of a conversion of a traditional game into a VR space. Yeah. And they usually just don't play out as well as you would. I've tried many titles. I've enjoyed a lot of them, but I've yet to find the title that I can imagine that I spent like 100 hours on.
Yeah, so yeah. No,
I'm still waiting for that one.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you, and part of that I think is also just at least for me personally, the idea of virtual reality versus the execution and kind of the real world application of that is still a little bit. I think there's still kind of a gap there as far as like an experience that in my head sounds like, man, this would be amazing to spend, 5, 10, 15 hours in, and then being hit with that reality that you have this kind of heavy weighted device that's strapped to your face and you're stuck in it, and like some of those things I think will go away hopefully as the technology gets better and all of that. But at the same time, like you were saying, it's right now it's a combination of solving the hardware problems while also wrapping our minds around the fact that VR is so different from traditional media that we have. It's not, there are game applications that are awesome in VR, but VR really isn't just gaming technology, and there's awesome film / like kind of movie experiences that you could have in VR, but again, VR really isn't film. It's something completely unique and different. So it'll be interesting to see once the technology gets a little bit better, and then also once developers and the people working in the VR space, once they're able to develop all the skills that are required to make good experiences, but then also once they're fully able to kind of free their minds to the possibilities of what VR can actually bring to the table. It'll be interesting to see, I think, and it's exciting that, I mean, I know you've been in the industry for a while as far as, seeing where PC 3D graphics have kind of progressed over the decades, and this is definitely kind of a, like, did you ever think that we would be in this position, like maybe looking back, like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, did you think that this is the direction that we'd eventually be pushing, or is this something new?
It is a bit new. So I think like the fact that VR came in was not a surprise. I mean, VR as a concept existed for a very long time.
Yeah.
I think what I was a bit surprised at, it was commercialized in a pretty fast fashion. So I was kind of expecting in the beginning it would be like a 10 grand, like a solution that random people would have that you would use for professional purposes only, and they would exist in that fashion for a while. Mm-hmm. But from the moment when it was first Oculus was first talked about the point where commercial solutions were on market was actually pretty short in this case, and the quality of the headset was actually very high. The hype was amazing. I mean, everybody was talking about VR, so that was definitely surprising to me.
Yeah, no, it's interesting.
I was honestly I was expecting that around this time after the launch, like a year or two later, it would be prevalent, like everybody would have one, or like at least everybody who considers them like a true PC gamer would have a VR headset, and you would maybe spend like at least some 10-20% of your time just playing VR games. Mm-hmm. But that part has not happened.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to hear that, because looking at the landscape now, you kind of are wondering, like, a lot of us, like, more, hardcore enthusiasts of VR are kind of looking at things and, man, like, what is it going to take to kind of reach that next milestone? What's it going to take to and you hear, with a lot of the new groundbreaking kind of stuff that's going to be happening in the next couple of years as far as the hardware is concerned, like maybe some of that will kind of spur yet another renaissance in VR. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of think back to, I mean, as recently as 2012, 2013, I mean, really the only places that you were seeing VR at all was more in these kind of boutique, more commercial applications, universities and theme parks and that sort of thing, and in such a short time to go from the technology really not being accessible to your average person to now really anyone that's kind of interested in dabbling can just pick up something for relatively cheap and go. It's remarkable how in a way how quickly that's all happened, and it's just like you said, it makes you wonder what it's going to take to hit that next level, and then if we are going to have those amazing experiences that are just kind of must-haves, like it's kind of a chicken and an egg thing, like when. Is it the must-have experiences that are going to make everyone go out and buy the headsets, or like what's it going to take, I guess, to get the ecosystem mature enough to produce a title like that? Because it's kind of a unique problem, I think, compared to how traditional video games kind of developed.
Yeah, definitely. Like it's I mean, Nintendo has done it like twice with Wii and now Switch, which is basically they produce the content and that makes people buy the hardware.
Yeah.
But and that's at least like a known way to solve it. But for them, of course, the price point is a lot less, and they sell everything. So you just go to the store, buy it, and that's it. For VR, you buy the headset, you buy the PC, you set it up. Like even setting it up can be a bit of a chore if you like not dabbled in the PC stuff before.
Yeah.
The other solution, of course, it could be just that it grows over time. So it can slightly become like the internet, which just slowly grew into this thing that everybody uses. It didn't have like its moment when suddenly like everybody like no, I have to get on the internet. It's just like slowly progressed to that point.
Yeah. No, and something.
I'm kind of like I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm really looking forward to that killer app title.
Yeah.
I'm kind of hoping that would take the place. Maybe like an indie game would come out that has like a really cool, innovative solution. That it doesn't have to be super like graphically intensive either. It can be just like that. It's the design is awesome, and that would be enough that people then again you show it off to your friends. You see it everywhere. There's articles about it. People want to try it out.
Yeah.
And as soon as the adoption is there, I know the large game publishers today. I mean, the adoption of VR is not sufficient for the really big publishers to throw their lot in.
Yeah.
The budget is so high for like a big budget game that even if you sell one to everybody who has a VR headset, you won't make your money back.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that they would. I mean, it's untapped territory in the sense that this is a whole new playing field. Mm-hmm. If you're not killing it in console, maybe you could be killing it here.
Yeah.
So opportunity is great. People are just slightly worried of taking the leap, but eventually someone will.
No, cause, and like you said, I mean, people are always looking for new ways to sell hardware and to new ways to kind of create a niche for yourself. And I feel like VR definitely is a way to make people continue to want to have the latest and greatest technology and any place where there's interesting problems to solve and that sort of thing will always kind of even if the money isn't necessarily there. I think I've seen a lot of excitement as far as engineers, developers, all that are just in it for kind of solving this next tier of exciting problems, right? And that in and of itself is exciting because you hope that through kind of solving those issues and kind of engaging with that frontier, that hopefully that will yield financial results in the long term.
Yeah, man, I'm very sure it will. There's so many let's say if the VR headset was extremely light and portable and you could carry it in your pocket, for example, why would your laptop need a screen at all?
Yeah,
your laptop could be nothing but the computing unit and keyboard. That's it.
No, that's a good.
Same thing. I have 3 displays on my desk right now.
Yeah.
Why would you need any of them if I had a VR headset that was like a sufficiently high quality? Mm-hmm. I could have the displays anywhere I want. I could have them move any size, any orientation, or just have the things like floating in the air as I choose. It has the potential to change the world or the way we operate with computers and devices. Of course, there's AR that can also solve a bunch of these problems, but I think the short-term VR it's a lot easier technical problem to solve than AR. So I'm kind of thinking that VR still has a good way to show itself, and of course for immersive entertainment, it's still superior to AR.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, I totally agree. And yeah, regardless of what the technology, what form it ultimately ends up taking, whether it's VR, AR, X, there's people are throwing all kinds of terms out there as far as trying to categorize what this stuff is now. But yeah, long term, it's these concepts of being able to render these realistic worlds and be able to augment what you're able to see around you, use like you were saying, be able to kind of seamlessly tap into processing power to enhance our everyday lives. Like all of those things, whether it be enclosed in VR or an enhancement like AR, like these are all ideas that are powerful enough to where once they're implemented well, like it's not something that when people look at VR and wonder if it's going to be a fad or if it's something, I don't think it's as simple as that, because it's the underlying ideas and technologies here that I think no matter what happens with the industries themselves, they're powerful enough to impact our lives going forward. They're not going to go away.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's maybe like I've sometimes described that it's kind of like audio control that you use. Like a lot of people still today, you say that the ones in phones or Alexa or Siri, they're pretty limited and don't work really that well. But I don't think anybody can assume that it's a bad idea. It's going to go away in a bit. The expectation is it's just going to improve to the point where just you use it and it works like magic.
Yeah.
And I believe like VR and AR and MR, all these are kind of similar solutions. So it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
It's just going to improve to the point where it becomes from a thing that only a few people use to a thing that people can always expect that it's there.
Yeah. No, because that's I think the Siri and Alexa and all of those are a great example of that. It's maybe not the idea itself that's a bad one. It's sometimes the execution that doesn't live up to your expectations. So it's when you expect it to respond a certain way, and maybe right now it's not reacting the way you envision it in your mind, but it's just a matter of time before all of those things line up properly once things are more developed. And likewise in VR, AR, all of these things, I think you can pull anyone off the street in and explain to them what this stuff is, and everyone's going to get excited. And then it's the degree to which people, I think, are able to overlook some of the deficiencies that we're kind of suffering through right now in early stages of development, to whether they're ready to adopt it now or wait to see it more in the future. Like it's again going back to what you were saying before about what people are willing to put up with as far as like image quality versus latency and performance and all of that. Like it's interesting to me to see people that have no experience playing games whatsoever, where if I bring them to my apartment and have them play a game, let's say a pretty great looking PC game running at 1080p versus 4K, they might not see much of a difference. They might not be able to tell anti-aliasing is applied or not. They might not, but those same people that wouldn't be able to see the difference between like a 1080p versus 4K native game running on a nice screen, you put them in a VR headset, and the first thing that they're noticing is, oh, it doesn't look as sharp as what I want it to look like, or like it's funny how these how people that aren't even accustomed to looking at these like small nuances that we tend to look at as kind of the more hardcore PC users, how your average person is bringing these high expectations to VR because it's such a natural extension of, I guess, what they're already accustomed to. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. The idea of looking in VR, it's like maybe its curse is that it's sufficiently close to being so good that you can immediately notice, even like you said, even a novice can immediately tell the points where it's not, because some of the aspects are so good.
Yeah,
I think this is actually like VR games look really, really good by and large.
Yeah,
but most like VR movies do not, because people regularly, like if you go to the movie theaters, the screen quality is awesome. You may have a 4K TV at home, or you have a super high DPI display on your phone. So even if you're watching just Netflix, the picture quality is crisp and awesome all the way.
Yeah.
But VR movies, by and large, because it's just the display quality it's high resolution, but not high enough to have the display so close to your face. And if you have any kind of like a frame rate deviation, that the frame rate is 30 when the display is actually 90, you see some jitters. Like you can immediately tell it's not as good as what I would expect to watch from my home TV. And you can tell it even more readily than you can from a game. And this is a bit unfortunate, so I'm kind of hoping that like an upcoming like a VR movie will solve this by just doing it right, because of course you can sidestep these problems by just doing smart design. But I've yet to see that. Maybe was it so that Cameron is doing the next Avatar in VR?
I'm not sure. I think I heard something about that. Yeah, or at least
I have like a vague memory. But like the reason why I brought it up is that the first Avatar was the first 3D movie I actually enjoyed. Like I found it that this for the first time 3D movie was done correctly, and it didn't irritate me. So maybe that will be the first VR movie that will then sell
I'm trying to think it was either that or maybe he made some kind of a comment like if I wasn't working on certain films right now, like what I would be looking at would be like experimenting with VR or something like, just in general, I think a lot of, creatives are really interested in the medium once it kind of gets going. People see the potential. So,
the potential is like, I've seen many cool like VR attempts for this, but like I said, it's a bit sad watching it for a little bit, and then it's like feels that this just does not feel sharp and clean. I think because we're just being spoiled by the fact that high quality screens in 2D are so readily available everywhere.
No, I agree, and it's interesting that you bring up the example of even kind of a more simplistic like VR gaming experience could be what we're looking for as far as like kind of a system seller type product. I mean, one of the closest examples I've seen of that, was the recent release of Beat Sabers, which is, a fairly simple game, like on, as far as just the game mechanics and visual design and all of that. I mean, it looks really good, but it's fairly simple compared to some of these, more AAA titles that you play in traditional PCs and consoles. But at the same time, it had a profound effect and influence, I think, in terms of like people in the VR market. I mean, you saw people just going crazy over it, and it's just because it's fun and it works well with our current platforms now. So, hopefully more titles like that can get people's attention and excitement. You see more and more titles like that. Hopefully, more and more people will start to be interested in trying it out.
Yeah, they're definitely like I said it before, but like Nintendo sold Wii on Wii Sports, and it was not because they had excellent graphics or, I mean, they were subpar to PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 at the time.
Yep.
But the masses don't care. They just wanted the good experience, and it gave them that. Yeah, and that's the thing.
And it's easy, I think that's the biggest thing right now. I think that's why I think standalone headsets really will have the potential to bring more people to the VR market, just because your average person right now doesn't really have the experience of building a PC or operating like a high powered PC. Once I think some of those barriers are removed, then hopefully it'll be easier and easier for people to join.
Yeah, I agree. And of course, like it will also make its way, like, because eventually, of course, I fully see that like a immersive, like almost like a AAA title game or almost realistic looking graphics is definitely the direction that we're pushing for. We're just not there yet.
Yeah. No, and I mean, as I'm sure you've seen from your work at Futuremark and now UL Benchmarks. I mean, the progress that we've made in the last couple of decades is crazy when it comes to how realistic you're able to render these scenes. And I mean, there's only so much you can take advantage of some of that stuff on traditional hardware. So VR is a great way of showing off at how far we've came, but also how far we have to go in order to kind of achieve the greatest potentials of some of the stuff that we're doing.
Yep, definitely.
So I guess just to circle back to VRMark a little bit before we kind of try to close this thing out. You had kind of briefly mentioned to me, like in the current state of the benchmark, what different tiers of performance levels the benchmark's able to test for. You had mentioned, I think, like one tier of the demo, the orange level, being made primarily for current testing current hardware for the Vive and the Rift, but then also there were different modes within the benchmark to test for DirectX 12 applications, as well as kind of higher resolution, more future-looking applications of VR. I don't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about VRMark specifically and where you see that application going in the future as a VR progresses.
Yeah, so like you mentioned, so we have the VRMark Orange Room that we specifically created back in I think it's almost a year and a half ago, and it was really designed to answer the question: is my PC VR ready? So at the time when Oculus and Vive were coming up, this was a thing that people were wondering, because both gave the min spec, but of course in PC the min spec is always somewhat confusing, because there are many vendors and you can reach the min spec with different variations.
Yeah.
If you have a higher CPU, does that mean that you can have a lower GPU and that kind of thing? So we designed a benchmark specifically for the purpose that you can run it on your PC and figure out if you're ready for VR. And it basically told you, can you hit 90 frames per second on both Vive and Oculus consistently?
Quick question. A quick question on that, for not to interrupt you, but I was kind of curious, as far as when you guys were gauging the performance of the headsets that have been released already. Did you guys get a chance to look into it all? I know sometimes the complexities of PCs in general tend to manifest themselves a little bit more in VR, given kind of the nature of the beast as far as looking for low latency and high frame rates and all of that. As far as complications that arise with different USB configurations or different monitoring softwares in the background that kind of add hiccups to the process. I just know in general, performance doesn't always seem as straightforward to get to for VR applications as opposed to normal, traditional applications. Do you guys run into any of those kind of problems? Do you try to measure those kind of things in the benchmark, or not really? I was just kind of curious.
So we did run into a bunch, but of course a bunch of it could be that because we're working with pretty early prototypes for an extended time. So I have to admit, I don't remember how many we ran into with the final solutions.
Okay.
The design of the benchmark is really to limit itself to inside the PC stuff. So peripherals, USBs, and that kind of things, we can just then assume that they would work. We did think about whether we should test those as well, but functional testing is usually and has been the outside the realm of what we do. So we just aim to measure performance.
Okay, no, that's like I said, just a question I had, because I know those kind of issues can arise sometimes. So. Yeah.
I do remember setting it up multiple times on multiple computers, and it was not always super smooth. So I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's a mystery. The thing about it is sometimes it's you don't know why you're having the issues you're having, which is on paper maybe everything looks like it's going to run fine, and then just oddly some random system just won't run the way you think it should.
Yeah, there's a bunch of settings. I think the situation is better now, but I remember at the moment of launch and slightly before launch, there are definitely things that you could do to cause undesirable effects on your frame rate that you then just had to remember, if this is on at the same time as this other thing is on, then your frame rate is half.
Yeah. Ugh. But anyway, so not trying to interrupt you, but so continue. So I think you had just mentioned the orange.
So Orange Room is specifically designed for that one. It does have a sliding scale, just like a traditional benchmarks, which means that a higher score is still better. But it's really designed to be answer the question: are you ready for VR or not? And the min spec was set whatever it was at the moment when Vive and Oculus launched. Of course, the specs have a little bit changed since then, but it's still a very good a general view of whether you can do it. And the first test that tells you just yes or no kind of thing, it's free. Like our traditional with our benchmarks, there's always a free trial version you can run that answers this specific question. Okay. Then after that one, we produced like 2 new versions. So what we call the VRMark Blue Room. This was an idea that we shot to see what is the future of VR devices. And so we produced content intentionally like that's forward looking quite a bit. So the effects that we threw in are quite expensive. There's a lot of content. It's really like a high-end PC game. And we even run it at 5K resolution with the anticipation of like a future headset that will run at over 4K resolutions. Mm-hmm. We freely admit that it's excessive, or it was excessive at the time of launch. It's almost reasonable at this time, but at the time it was intentionally made excessive. And one of the reasons for this one is that VR headsets have VSync on. So VSync is vertical sync, mm-hmm. which means that you cannot render at faster than the display refresh rate. So if the display refresh rate, like in headsets, is 90, mm-hmm. if you can do 90, you cannot do more, which effectively means that there is a maximum score for the benchmark. Okay. If you hit 90, that you can't get more. Even if you could do like 200, you still get 90. Got it. So for this reason, we made the Blue Room so heavy that nothing on the market or in the foreseeable market would hit 90, which means that we could always measure the difference between devices because nobody would be hitting the so-called max score. Got it. You can avoid this effect by basically running the benchmark. All the benchmarks also you can run without the headset. Mm-hmm. Then the rendering is done exactly the same way, but just instead of sticking it on the HMD, you put it on the PC display, and then there's no limit. But we wanted to be able to also do the benchmarking in the HMD mode. Okay. But yeah, the Blue Room is quite impressive. So if you have a chance to look at it, I recommend that people do. It's also a pretty good idea because the frame rate is going to be low. And this is one where you can also alter the resolution. So you can drop the resolution to a low setting. And then this is the one I did the study with internally with our 40-odd guys. Got it. Of seeing like what people prefer, the 5K resolution with a low frame rate or like a 2K resolution with a smooth frame rate. So you can try it for yourself to see which one you prefer. Definitely. Yeah. The last one that we reduced or introduced, that was about a year ago, okay. Slightly less than a year ago, is called the Sign Room, and like you mentioned, it's basically VR done in DX12. So for those not in the business, so Microsoft introduced DX12 3 years ago, and it's basically just a new way to approach graphics programming. It's a more low-level programming approach. It gives more control to the developer, also more responsibility for the developer. And you can get closer to the hardware. You can program a bit smarter, and in the end, you can also produce better value. Okay. So it offers a bunch of technologies that are pretty good for VR use specifically, and that's why we wanted to do a DX12 benchmark there. I think there are now some DX12 applications on the market. I think at the time of the launch, there were no DX12 VR games yet. Wow. Okay. But we really see that's going to be the future. Like I said, it is more effort for the developer, so it takes a while for the developers to move on to this, especially since, like as we discussed at length, VR is already a platform for which development is it's hard to recoup your investments. Yeah. But it does allow you to do things that are beneficial. So this is definitely like the long-term thing. So eventually everybody's going to move to it. But we already have a benchmark for it, and it's specifically, again, we're looking to show people what you can do with DX12. Like, for example, like a Crossfire SLI works much better than it did with DX11. And the other thing is that it reduces the amount of CPU you have to use, so that you're not quite as easily limited with the CPU. This is like a traditional problem with DX11 versus DX12 is that DX11 the CPU bottleneck is actually quite high. Yeah, or the especially CPU is actually quite high.
Yeah, I mean, and it seems like it's impacted even more in VR because you're running so many more processes. Just So that
it can. Yeah, it's DX11. In many cases is single core dependent. So like as soon as one of your cores is the driver like takes, if that's filled up, it doesn't matter if you have lots of other cores, your game will still slow down. Okay. So the future is definitely DX12 or Vulkan. So Vulkan, of course, is something that especially the Valve guys are pushing heavily. They're kind of like similar but slightly different approaches to the same problem. And but it's definitely that's the direction everybody wants to go.
Okay.
For the future, like of course we're never standing still. We actually just launched a VRMark for mobile.
Okay.
So we have a VRMark solution for Daydream and Cardboard, and also for Gear VR, though I don't think that's available for consumers.
Okay.
And it does like a similar approach, but just for mobile phones. The rooms are indigo, amber, and color I forget, which is really, really sad for me. Marketing kill me when they hear this. But the approach is the same. So we have a Daydream ready level. So we just test if your phone is ready for Daydream or can produce the frame rate required for Daydream readiness, and another one that then is designed to benchmark pretty much any phone. But similar approach, similar functionality, and similar design. And the future for both the mobile and the desktop is the one I mentioned already. Is really the foveated rendering. So that's what we're going to introduce next in a benchmark, yet unnamed and unscheduled, or I can't share exactly when. But that's definitely the future we want to go to. So all the vendors are pushing for this. It makes sense for all things concerned, and it's definitely like the next technical step for like on the software side for VR.
Awesome. Okay. Well, perfect. And and you mentioned software side as far as I don't know how much you can say about like foveated rendering and its applications like on current hardware, but is that more something to look forward to in the future, or is that something that people can potentially look forward to taking advantage of on current hardware? So
all current hardware supports foveated rendering in one way or another. So even most mobile hardware has some kind of a foveated rendering. What they don't do is that they're all kind of different. So they solve the same problem in different ways, which of course from a development point of view is taxing. From benchmarking point of view is kind of quite hard because you can't do fair comparisons.
Yeah.
But I would hazard to say that future solutions of hardware will just do smarter ways around it. So it will be even more improved.
Got it. Okay. Well, awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much for taking that. And for people out there that are interested in, trying out VRMark themselves, you mentioned that there's a free version of the software. There's also, the paid version of the software. Where can everyone on the various platforms find your applications and learn more about what UL Benchmarks is up to?
So our website is benchmarks.ul.com, but most like if you're in the PC gaming business, then all our stuff is on Steam. So that's the most easiest way to get both the paid versions and also the demo versions.
Okay, and what would you? I mean, I'm sure you'd recommend anyone picking up the paid versions, but what are the best applications for running the free version versus the paid app? The paid version.
So the paid app gives you, like in all 3DMark, PCMark, and VRMark, the paid app gives you more tests. So like the free version just gives you one, gives you the option to fiddle with the settings, so you can try out different approaches, and also gives you like new testing modes. Like for example, in 3DMark we have a stress test mode that tests the stability of your PC. Seeing if you're able to maintain the frame rate for consistency. It's quite interesting in laptops if you're overclocked or if you're just suspecting that your computer may be experiencing difficulties. Yeah. So we offer like a little bit of things, and if you like data or PC stuff in general, we produce like a large amount of system information and specific result data to minutia for everything for people who want to play around with that stuff.
No, I know all that stuff is super helpful to me. Like even like you were mentioning, the stress testing in particular. Like sometimes, especially if you're trying to reach, if you're kind of on shaky grounds as far as how stable your system is, rather than just running the benchmark one. Even if you're able to get through it once, you might not be able to get through the benchmark for an entire hour. Which, like for example, like you want you want to be able to know if you're going to run into problems, during hour 2 of playing a game, and you don't always notice that right away from like a shorter 5 minute. So like, all those things at least have been super helpful for me.
If you have like a thermal issue, it can easily be that your like performance goes down gradually, and then you just like you get this feeling that, man, I swear this game used to run better, and now it's slugging behind, and it in some cases it can be that it's true. Yeah. Oh, and just as a shameless plug, I don't know exactly when this is coming out, but we're on sale on Steam in the summer sale. 70% off. So this is the right time to be purchasing.
Yeah, I think normally VRMark is like $20, and I think right now, what is it? It's like $5.99 or until I think it's July 5th, correct? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, it is until the end of the Steam summer sale. I think that's the 5th.
Yeah. No, I think it is too. I'm not 100% sure yet when we're going to put this up, so we might try to put it up, before the Steam sale's over with. If not, anyone, the software in Steam goes on sale at different points. So like, if you guys, if you're listening to this and the Steam sale is already done and over with, definitely be on the lookout. Like add VRMark to your wish list or your watch list in Steam, and if you're interested, pick it up at a later point as well. So
it's well worth the money at full price too. Just say.
Yeah. No, as with all the VR titles that we recommend during these Steam sales. So like I awesome. I totally agree. So well, anyways, thank you again so much for talking to me, Jani. I really appreciated all of your insights and kind of background and what you guys are doing at UL Benchmarks, and look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Thank you. Bye.